Well, it's getting warm outside. It's supposed to be like 75 next week, so I figured I'd get going on the old Goldwing. And I was thinking about it last night. I think I might start calling it the Redwing. You know, Redwing, Blackbird, I don't know. Give it something other than saying, go for a ride on the old Goldwing. But anyway, I got to thinking, I got maybe 150, 200 miles on it last fall before it was time to park it. And Buddy was riding behind me and he's like, that taillight you got, when you sit on there, it is below the fender line. So looks right now like it'd be real nice, but evidently you get 6'3", 200 something pounds sitting on it. Taillight's down here. One thing about bikes is I don't really want to get rear-ended. So I ordered up some really small but super bright LED bullet lights. I was going to try and put them on. I'm going to move the license plate to a vertical position back here. I've never really been a big fan of that look, but I think having this hang down in here kind of ruins the whole look through the center, hey, there's no rear frame section kind of thing. So yeah, that was my plan for today. And then I remembered also on my last ride, I was about 10 miles from home and the main ignition fuse blew, and sitting on the side of the road looking at it going, how am I going to get this thing home? There's no extra wires on here that I can cut and bridge the gap. Wife was working, buddies were at work, so I'm like, I guess I might be walking home and get the trailer. Well, luckily I jingled my pocket and remembered that I had some change in there, which I don't normally ever do. If I can get this apart. Edit this out later since I can't get it. So if you're ever in a pickle and you blow a fuse, just ram a penny in there. Oh, I got more than that. I got 11 cents to get me home. Yeah, you can see a piece of it there. It didn't blow, it was just old and so brittle that it quit making connection. So yeah, I mean, that's what got me home, 11 cents. But then I also got to thinking, what else did I do at the end of the season that needed work? Well, the oil pump is in behind the water pump, I guess. And there's a little weep hole down at the front. And I was giving my buddy crap because I parked it next to his Harley, then it started leaking oil. But there's a weep hole in here somewhere that when you run it, evidently the charge pressure from the oil leaks past one O-ring, and then there's a weep hole and it comes down, leaks on the ground, and then your water pump is on the other side of that weep hole. It's kind of a decent system, I guess, for what you got going. So what was supposed to be just let's throw some taillights on and fix some of my wiring. I think I'm going to paint this black. It sticks out too much being raw aluminum. And then the other big one is I had this switched over to be gravity fed to the carburetors. Had a kink in the line, so I just zip tied it to see how it would work. Evidently it does not work very good. So I've got a fuel pump that I'm going to put back in here somewhere, because when you're hammering on it, it pulls real hard first to second gear, and then once you get up into third, fourth, it starts really sucking the fuel and it starts bogging down. I thought I was having an issue with the gas cap vent. Had two different vents on it. or caps. Neither one of them vented very good, so I figured, well, it was made to have a fuel pump, so we'll put that back on. What I thought was going to be a couple-hour project has now become a couple-day project because I remembered all the other stuff I wanted to fix on it. So I guess we'll start taking apart the water pump, see how that goes. Also, tell me you haven't worked on your Goldwing in a while without telling me. Not water pump. That's the oil filter. I didn't take it out. Calm down. But yeah, that hole is right there. See? Oil dripping on the ground. So, step one, drain your coolant out of here. That's oil. Coolant. We'll take this one out, let her drain, and we'll take 1, 2, 3 bolts off. Remove this hose clamp, pull the thermostat out. Probably going to leave the thermostat housing on this cover, and we'll get there in a second. Well, hopefully there's more coolant than that in there. That's vented. Take the radiator cap off. Oh. Had that problem before. There we go. Nice steady stream. There. Now I got a little light on the situation because somebody might actually be wondering how to do this. Don't forget your bolt is in the first bucket that you dropped it in. This has a real nice silicone covered washer that somebody gooed the tar out of. Are these 8mm? Yep. I gotta take the hose clamp off first. That's a 10mm. If you're gonna get a little horsey with a screwdriver, you just want to be very gentle. Here we go. Twist the hose off. Looks like I got a little bit of a rust issue, but I'm not surprised. This thing sat for I don't know how many years before I started messing with it. So yeah, that's the water pump. Okay, well, if you read the book all the way through, it does say you have to remove this for some reason first, and then it says go back to chapter 4 to remove the lower front engine cover. Well, I didn't feel like taking the radiator out. It's 2 more hose clamps that I don't need to mess with. So I took a ratchet strap very gently, just enough to hold the radiator out without it falling down and pulling on everything. Get enough room to get into these bolts for the front lower engine cover. Okay, there was more than 6 bolts holding it, and the plot thickens on the bolt sizes. We have 4 the same length. One's super long. Super long one goes right there. Well, yeah, right up in here. But got them all out. Yeah, not much room to hit. There we go. And gonna have to find a drain pan because I'm assuming that goes into the crankcase and I'm gonna lose all my engine oil. Please pause 5 seconds for station identification. Okay, well, we got my way too tall drain pan in here, sort of. Keep tapping on that nice little peg they give you to wrap on. Don't forget to take the plug out of your drain. Oh, yep, piece is falling out. Let that drain for a second. Boy, that looks like a lot of stuff that I don't want to be messing with. I'm guessing that's the guy. Maybe. Maybe there's not even supposed to be oil in there. I don't know. The Haynes manual doesn't really say much on it, so I guess we'll let this drain, and there's the piece that fell out. Figure out where that went. And once we get this drained down, we'll see where we're at. Okay, well, we got the front cover pulled out here. The gasket, luckily, unluckily, whatever you want to call it, stuck to this side. So the engine side is relatively clean. I can get that cleaned up with a little chunk of sandpaper and some rags. But I sat here for, I don't know, 15 minutes with a razor blade trying to get this down to this at least, but up here it is very stuck. So I'm going to do what's generally not recommended and take a very fine wire wheel and try and clean this up as gently as I can, knowing that the wire wheel can gouge the aluminum. So we'll just give it a light little buzz here and get this part cleaned up, and we can set this back aside and, well, not set it aside, I guess. This is where I gotta go. So this is the water pump in here. This will take off the impeller that pulls out that way. Might have a, oh, the snap ring is what's holding the impeller in here. So, but there's our weep hole. That's what was leaking oil. So after looking at it, this is supposed to have oil in here, and this seal right here is what's kind of called in sick and is letting some oil come by. It could be the O-rings. I'm assuming there's O-rings in here, but we'll get this cleaned up and keep moving on it here. Alright, well, we got this all cleaned up nice quick. As you can see, if we can get it on camera, maybe. These little lines right here, and then maybe some scruffy lines going this way. So I did more damage with the razor blade to the sealing surface than I did with the wire wheel. But anyway, got that cleaned up, so we'll hose this out with brake clean before we put it back in. Moving on to the water pump here, we'll get set up for that and go from there. Okay, well, 10 millimeter on these guys. Let's see what we got hiding underneath it. So each of these have what I'm guessing is a sealing washer. They appear to be the same size. No lock thread or thread locking, whatever. Drop them on the floor. And then Maybe a little tap tap. Not where I expected it to come apart, but nonetheless, here's your water pump O-ring, which is probably the culprit. I don't see any noticeable gouges or creases, but there's another. Does that line up with my hole? Yes. So there appears to be a weep hole from in here. Alright, got it pressed back together. Everything spins, works as it should. I have not put the snap ring on here yet, but took this O-ring off. It's pretty bright. Tone it down, maybe. Okay, so you got your sealing ring on the O-ring. When you put a new O-ring on, it should only be touching in the center, but as you press it into the case, it's going to square it out. So if you've got gunk in here like this, and all these chunks of, I don't know, coolant deposits, I guess, you might not get the seal you're looking for. So I just take a little pick, get the big stuff. Then I've got a toothbrush that I run around once I get the big stuff loose. And then we'll just spray it off, making sure that you get the edges also. If you have some sandpaper, you can try and wedge it in there. High grit, no, high number, low grit, yeah. Get this kind of cleaned up. It doesn't seal it on anything, but it is a press fit into the housing. So we'll get these cleaned up. And the other big thing when you're putting O-rings on, where'd my old one go? Okay, back to what I was saying with O-rings. When you put a new O-ring on, you usually end up wanting to get it started. Let's see if I, come on. And then you try to roll it on, like so. But the problem is, can we see it close enough? Is when you push it down, you're rolling the O-ring, putting a bunch of stress in there. So you can roll it on there, but then take a pick. I guess you probably do it before you snap it in there. But you take your pick and you hook it inside of the O-ring, and then you just roll it around a couple times, and that'll give that O-ring a chance to slip and move and spin however it needs to lay without being twisted and having tension on it. Because when you have that tension in there, a lot of times that's where you're going to end up with your leak, is because the O-ring is rolled, so then it's, you know, it's just not sealing right. So the other thing, you take your old O-ring that you take off of things, and when you get a random kit full of handfuls of O-rings, you want to look at the width, which the new one should be a little bit thicker, but you want the same inside to outside, same thickness. Some are square, some are X O-rings. So that's the biggest thing, is when you're doing O-rings. Roll them on if you need to, but then give them a run around or two so they can relax. And just make sure that you have the same sealing thickness as the one that you took off. So now we have this one all relaxed. Just go ahead and tap it down a little bit. Now we have the replaced O-rings on the water pump. And I'll go down and clean up the case. Pick up from there. Well, now I got the case cleaned up. I'm not worried about this. This is all over the whole cooling system, so that little bit ain't gonna make any bit of difference. Next thing, seating O-rings. You can use a little dab of grease, a little dab of oil. I like to use whatever it's sealing. So I'm just gonna dip into my drain pan here run a nice little, real light skim coat, just enough for it to slide in and not pinch and roll and bind. So don't hog it up, but O-rings are picky. So you get that lined up as best you can. It's going to fight you the whole way. So if you can wiggle it, wiggle and push, wiggle and push. Maybe some light taps will get you started, at least in the ballpark. I will be replacing these little sealing washers, assuming that that might have had something to do with my leak. See if they reach. They do not. I was really hoping that they would reach enough, and then you could just kind of start snugging and tapping them in to get them started. But evidently not. Quite the press fit we got here. Just a little bit of a tapping device. And just very lightly, you can see I didn't have anything holding it, so it was just some light taparoos. See if we can start a bolt. They might be off center a bit. It's the same size. Now, how do I turn that? Punch. See if the Leatherman can save the day. Yep. So just using something pretty skinny and extremely light pressure, because you're going into aluminum, just to get your threads lined. Yep, just get them lined up. Start your bolts. Replacing your washers. And I'm sure the book tells you how many Newton meters or ugga-duggas you're supposed to torque these at. I'm just going to run them in by hand until they feel right. And then we'll go down on the engine and start replacing random O-rings that go in there. As I'm cleaning away here, I'm guessing this is a water port. This O-ring has seen better days, and I don't know if anybody's been in here, so this might have been from the factory. See, she's got some pretty wicked squish going on there, but evidently it was sealing, so that's what you want to try to avoid when you're putting this back together, and we'll see how well I can pull that off. Or it can be like this guy, put it back together and never know about it, but it's kind of interesting stuff. Oh, hey. Yeah, so time to go back together. Got this very thin ported gasket. Just get her lined up on the pegs. I guess there's only one. I'm going to try, as the manual suggests, with no silicone on it.
We interrupt this program to bring you a special report.
I usually put some on, but I guess we'll try and follow the book. Making sure all of your O-rings are still in the same area that you placed them in. And you have to try and line up, I just can't see anything there. You have to try and line up the gear shift indicator and the water pump. That shift indicator looks like it's in the right spot. Yep, there goes an O-ring. This would have been much easier to do when I had the engine sitting on the floor painting it. But that's what test rides are for. Lovely O-ring again. We've got a little bit of resistance from something. Boy. Boy. Bounced it around in here enough. Let's check my O-rings, like that one that just fell out again. There we go. So I had to turn the water pump just a little bit to get the shafts to line up. And I think my gear shift indicator is messing with me now. Yeah, there goes it. Oh, this is fun. We might have to cut to commercial break. All right, shine some light on the subject. Got all the bolts in, put them back in the proper holes. Yeah. So now we're gonna stick the radiator back together, making sure that you get your nice little clamps in there. Bushings. Pulling your very lightly held ratchet strap off. Oy. You poor guys that are still running full fairings and have a comfortable ride and all that fancy stuff. You got 13 hours of shroud removal to get to where I'm at and done already. But okay, radiator is mounted. Got this side cleaned up, this side's cleaned up. We'll get the hose on first, since this hose is very, very tight. Nice little extra wiggle there. Check your lineup pins, make sure it'll go together. Take your nice little gasket you got. Figure out which way this thing goes. Like so. Then carefully, without messing up the gasket on your lineup pins, get it wiggled right into place. And then reinstall your bolts and tighten up your hose clamps. Check your engine oil. Probably change it since you're here and 3/4 of the way into an oil change. And you should have a ready to go Goldwing, Redwing, Honda GL 1200 SE special Aspen Sade A variety. I don't know why they have so many numbers and letters for these things, but yeah, so we'll get this button back up, and then I'll start messing with the tail lights and clean it back up, because it sat outside for 3 days in the fall and got covered in leaves and bugs and whatever, and give her a couple more rides and then maybe see if somebody else wants it. So we'll get a video when I get the lights on. I don't know, it's probably not really worth making a whole special video just to do tail lights on something that nobody else has. So we'll get her cleaned up, maybe take her for a rip a couple days here when it gets nice out. See ya.